then Olson's point that we do what we know before we know what we do has always been to me very attractive as a premise. So people, I'd far rather do what I know than know what I do. And I don't think they are distinct from one another. As we find out what we know in doing it, that we act in the actuation of our lives, or that which constitutes acts in our lives, we realize, realize what we have as actual event, and are as actual event. The other poem I want to sort of read into the context is one written somewhat earlier, and I think coming from a New England background, which is a crazy blend of superstitions and moralistic discretions therefrom. Wherein, I mean, think of New England as a place where witches were so real that they could be, that literal human beings could be burnt at stakes, etc. Where, if you read, Cotton Mather's various, texts thus involved, and other texts of the same period, you realize how extraordinarily actual these presences were. And I remember living in Mallorca, in a little town called Banyal Bufar on the north coast, that the next town from us, down maybe 4 or 5 miles down the road, still had a witch's coven. That these were, and I would be very curious to have some glamorizing or non-journalistic report as to the activity of witch covens or witches in the L.A. area. I mean, I haven't the least doubt or distrust of the fact that witch constitutes an actual order of persons in the world. I don't think you'll ever find a poet who does. It isn't that he simply agrees to it. He may have various attitudes toward the situation of witches, but I've never met a poet who didn't both respect and even have some instance of the fact of witches in the world. So that's poets are very close to witches not in what they do, but in the order of experience that they tend to live in. Then the poem, anyhow, that I'd like us to read in is a poem that I was very shy in writing, a poem called "The Door," and it's dedicated to Robert Duncan. For several reasons. First, that he's a very close and dear friend, and perhaps even more to the point, he's one of the few friends who can enter these areas of experience with great articulation and not authority, because that isn't what one either wishes or thinks to possess. But he enters with a not with confidence, but with he enters very directly upon these circumstances of experience. I don't know that it's altogether to the point, but the very circumstances of his life would give you some reason as to why. Simply that he was born on the West Coast, and his mother died in giving him birth, and therefore he was in the hospital for 6 months and was put up for adoption. And the parents, his step-parents, let's say, or his foster parents, were relatively, they're wealthy persons of Bakersfield, California. His father was an architect, his mother had apparently money of her own, and United Fruit Company and stuff like that. And both he and his sister, his stepsister, were adopted to in other words, to reify or to answer a situation that the parents had in relation to they were Hermeticists, that is, members of the call it a religious group involved with Hermes Trismegistus, and one of these they had therefore to have in their household, in their family group, a presence that should be thus angelic and a presence that should be thus demonic, and how to find such people. Well, they had instructions. I can't give you accurately how they had these instructions, but they had instructions as to how to look for these particular presences. And they were to look, in Robert's case, they were to look for a child born at a particular moment, who on a particular day, e.g., I think it was like, anyhow, born in a particular moment, and that child would be known to them. They would find that child, and that child would constitute the demonic in their environment. And then, in like way, they were to find the girl who wants to be a boy and wants to be a girl, and the girl was to be the angelic. And then think too, that obviously relates to the center of the feminine that we're speaking of. So Robert was adopted thus to be this presence. And I remember him speaking of his aunt, who, on reading The Wasteland, said that Eliot was interesting insofar as he got, but that had she had a chance to have conversation with him, she could frankly have cleared up many points of his confusion and really instructed him far more deeply than he seems to have been. So, I mean, Robert's acquaintance with this situation of experience really dates from his, earliest consciousness. Anyhow, the door. It is hard going to the door, cut so small in the wall where the vision which echoes loneliness brings a scent of wild flowers in a wood. What I understood, I understand. My mind is sometime torment, sometimes good and filled with livelihood, and feels the ground. But I see the door, and knew the wall, and wanted the wood, and would get there if I could, with my feet and hands and mind. Lady, do not banish me, for digressions. My nature is a quagmire of unresolved confessions. Lady, I follow. I walked away from myself. I left the room. I found the garden. I knew the woman in it. Together we lay down. Dead night remembers. In December we change, not multiplied, but dispersed, sneaked out of childhood, the ritual of dismemberment. Mighty magic is a mother. In her there is another issue of fixture, repeated form, the race renewal, the charge of the command. The garden echoes across the room. It is fixed in the wall like a mirror that faces a window behind you and reflects the shadows. May I go now? Am I allowed to bow myself down in the ridiculous posture of renewal, of the insistence of which I am the virtue? Nothing for you is untoward. Inside you would also be tall, more beautiful. Come toward me from the wall. I want to be with you. So I scream to you, who hears as the wind and changes, multiply, invariably, changes in the mind. Running to the door, I ran down, as the clock runs down, walked backwards, stumbled, sat down, hard on the floor near the wall. Where were you? How absurd, how vicious. There is nothing to do but get up. My knees were iron. I rusted in worship of you. For that one sings, one writes the spring poem, one goes on walking. The lady has always moved to the next town, and you stumble on after her. The door in the wall leads to the garden, where in the sunlight sit the graces in long Victorian dresses, of which my grandmother had spoken. History sings in their faces. They are young, they are obtainable, and you follow after them also in the service of God and truth. But the lady is indefinable. She will be the door in the wall to the garden in sunlight. I will go on talking forever. I will never get there. O lady, remember me, who in your service grows older, not wiser, no more than before. How can I die alone? Where will I be then who am now alone? What groans so pathetically in this room where I am alone? I will go to the garden. I will be a romantic. I will sell myself in hell. In heaven also I will be. In my mind I see the door. I see the sunlight before me across the floor beckon to me as the lady's skirt moves small beyond it.